How far would you go to protect what you love? That question doesn't leave the mind of James Chen, a dedicated supervisor of Tesla's production line in Fremont, California. James was not just an ordinary worker. He was passionate about the innovation that Tesla represented, a dream that combined technology and sustainability. But at the same time, he lived a reality that seemed increasingly unsustainable. After months of inexplicable decline in production, he found himself facing a crisis not only in his company, but in his own life. James, a 45-year-old man, was the son of immigrants, and his story was full of sacrifices and hopes. From a young age, he dreamed of being part of something bigger, something that could change the world. When he got a job at Tesla 15 years ago, he believed he had found his purpose. With a smile on his face and an unwavering determination, James dedicated his evenings and weekends to improving production line processes. For him, Tesla was not just a company. It was an extension of their identity, a symbol of innovation and progress. However, the reality of the work environment was harsh. The pressure for results grew every day, and the relentless pursuit of innovation often ignored the value of what already existed. James felt increasingly invisible, his contributions relegated to the past, while the leadership team, led by Elon Musk himself, seemed more interested in new projects than in recognizing the efforts of those on the front lines. He knew that the B7 production line was facing problems, but instead of receiving support, he felt isolated, as if he were fighting a lonely battle. The main conflict began to unfold when Elon, noticing the drop in production, decided to investigate. With his mind focused on results, he suspected that something was wrong and chose to install secret cameras on the production line. What he would discover would change everything. James, in an overtime marathon, was performing after-hours repairs, using his personal savings to repair machines that superiors said should be scrapped. Those moments of silence and solitude in the factory, out of sight of his colleagues, became a desperate struggle to keep his jobs and demonstrate that the old man still had value. When Elon watched the filming, a wave of emotions hit him. He saw a man who not only worked hard, but who also had a deep sense of responsibility and dedication. James wasn't just an employee, he was a symbol of what Tesla had lost sight of throughout its relentless pursuit of innovation. While the company focused on creating the new, James was struggling to maintain what already existed. James's vulnerability, his hopes, and his dreams of preserving the essence of the company he loved so much became evident. The production line scene, a symphony of machines and human beings, now carried an emotional weight. Every cog creaked under the pressure of time, and fluorescent lights shone on tired but determined faces. The environment was a reflection of James's struggle, where each day became a new challenge, and each repair a small act of rebellion against the inevitability of disposal. The walls of the factory, impregnated with sweat and dedication, seemed to whisper stories of struggle and perseverance. The dilemma Elon would face was profound. Should he continue to discard the old for the sake of the new, or should he learn from the example of James, a man who defied norms and fought against the tide of innovation to save what really mattered? That was the question that hung in the air, a question that would not only define the future of Tesla, but also shape the lives of James and everyone around him. James's journey was not just about fighting for a job, but about the value of work and dedication in a world that often prioritizes the new over what has already been built. In a scenario where innovation seemed to be the only answer, James became the embodiment of resistance, the man who believed that the past could teach valuable lessons for the future. So as the tension grew and the cameras recorded every move, James's heart beat with quiet hope. He was not only fighting for himself, but for a vision of a world where the value of human effort and experience should not be forgotten. Now, James's fate and the essence of Tesla were intertwined in a dilemma that would challenge the beliefs of everyone involved, leading them to question what it really means to innovate. James Chen, despite his determination, soon ran into small obstacles that tested his resilience in the workplace. The first of them appeared on a rainy morning when one of the main machines of the B7 line had an unexpected defect. The deafening noise of the machine stopping abruptly echoed through the factory, causing a frenzy in the teams. The pressure to keep production flowing was palpable, and James felt a knot in his stomach as he realized that if he couldn't fix the machine in time, the entire line could grind to a halt. He quickly made his way to the scene, his hands trembling as he opened the machine's lid, revealing complex gears and components he had memorized over the years. As he worked, his mind began to wander. He remembered his father, a mechanic who always told him, "Every problem has a solution, James. Sometimes we just need to look at it from a different angle." That phrase comforted him, but the pressure of the moment made him feel that perhaps there was no solution. Adrenaline rushed through his veins, and although he had faced similar challenges in the past, the weight of responsibility felt heavier than ever. He knew he needed to act fast, but uncertainty momentarily paralyzed him. With a deep sigh, James concentrated and dismantled what was needed, his hands moving with precision and familiarity. With each piece he removed, he felt a mixture of relief and anxiety, as if he were stripping off an armor that protected him from his vulnerabilities. Time seemed to be ticking, and he wondered if he could solve the problem before anyone noticed his internal struggle. Finally, after a few minutes that seemed like hours, he was able to identify the problem. A cable was frayed and needed to be replaced. With the machine repaired and production resumed, James felt a wave of relief, but also a subtle frustration. He realized that, even after the effort, the recognition he so desired would not come. His colleagues, who had once seen him as a leader, now viewed him with a mixture of respect and indifference. This duality in their interactions began to weigh on his heart, and he questioned whether he was really making a difference. It was in this phase of insecurity that James began to establish bonds with other workers on the production line. He met Anna, a young engineer who was in her second month of work at Tesla. She was passionate about electric cars and brought a contagious energy to the team. During a coffee break, Anna approached James, admiring his technical knowledge and commitment. The conversation flowed naturally, and soon they began to share ideas about improvements that could be implemented on the production line. This connection brought James a new lease of life. Anna became an unexpected ally, someone who encouraged him to express his ideas and not give up in the face of obstacles. Together they started working on a project to optimize the assembly process, something that could not only improve efficiency, but also, perhaps, catch the attention of management. The friendship that began amid shared challenges provided James with a new purpose and a sense of belonging that he felt he was missing out on. However, as James approached Anna, small hints of a larger conflict began to emerge. He realized that it wasn't just the pressure for results that bothered him, but also a growing feeling that something was wrong in the company's culture. The relentless pursuit of innovation seemed to eclipse the importance of caring for employees and recognizing their efforts. In a chance encounter, he heard murmurs about staff cuts and a new strategy that prioritized automation over valuing human labor. The idea that the company he loved so much could discard people as if they were parts of a machine made him uneasy. These small challenges and James's emotional reactions began to shape his journey. He was fighting not only for his position in the company, but also for a sense of self in a world that seemed increasingly indifferent to the value of being human. The warmth of his friendship with Anna encouraged him, but the weight of uncertainties and external pressures challenged him every day. James found himself in a moral dilemma. How far would he go to preserve not only his position, but also the essence of what Tesla represented to him and to many others? As he grappled with these emotions and the new alliances, James realized he was at the beginning of a journey that could lead him to confront not only the challenges of the production line, but also the deeper questions about his identity and his role in a rapidly changing world. Tesla's future and his own life were at stake, and James was about to discover that the struggles he faced were just the beginning of a much larger battle. James Chen, now enveloped in an environment fraught with uncertainty, felt the pressure increasing by the day. The production line was going through a critical phase, and the threat of automation hung like a dark cloud over workers. He watched his colleagues, who, like him, struggled with the idea of becoming obsolete, mere cogs in an impersonal machine. Their friendship with Anna, which had become a refuge in the midst of this storm, was also beginning to show cracks, as the reality of the work environment imposed unexpected challenges on them. One morning, while James and Anna were discussing their ideas for optimizing the assembly line, an emergency meeting was called. Management announced staff cuts and a plan to speed up the implementation of automation. James's heart raced. He felt as if the ground was opening up beneath his feet. The faces of his colleagues, once full of hope, have now become a canvas of despair and frustration. He saw Anna's expression transform, reflecting the same worry that consumed him. What was supposed to be a moment of collaboration became a breeding ground for fear and doubt. Anna, always optimistic, tried to find a way to transform the situation. If we can come up with a solid project that shows how we can increase efficiency without cutting staff, maybe we can change their perspective, he suggested, his eyes shining with determination. But James was torn. The idea of fighting against the tide seemed more difficult than ever. He hesitated, feeling the weight of responsibility not only for his future, but for the future of everyone around him. The moral dilemma deepened. How far would he go to protect not only himself, but those around him? The following days were an emotional roller coaster. James and Anna worked tirelessly on their proposals, but the pressure was relentless. James found himself struggling with the feeling of helplessness. At night, when he got home, exhaustion overwhelmed him, and he wondered if his actions would really make a difference. The echo of his father's phrase resonated in his mind. Every problem has a solution. But what if the solution wasn't enough? What if he couldn't protect those who became his friends? Interactions in the factory have changed. Those who had once shared laughter and stories began to drift away, each steeped in their own fears. James saw how the company's culture, which was supposed to be one of collaboration and innovation, had become an arena of competition and mistrust. The friendship with Anna, although strong, also began to be tested. Both became aware of the differences in their approaches. While Anna seemed increasingly willing to fight and confront management, James hesitated, fearing the consequences. One afternoon, after another day full of tensions, James found Anna alone in the rest area. She was staring at the ground, clearly shaken. "I'm starting to wonder if it's worth fighting for," she said, her voice low and hesitant. Her words hit James like a blow. He wanted to encourage her, but he also felt lost. He himself was on the verge of giving up. "Maybe we should consider other opportunities," he suggested, trying to hide the vulnerability in his voice. Anna looked at him with a mixture of surprise and sadness. "Do you really believe that this is what we want? Give up what we love?" The tension between them was palpable. James realized that he was moving away from the essence of what had brought joy and purpose to his life. The desire to protect himself was blinding him to the necessary struggle that many were going through. "It's not giving up, Anna. It's being realistic," he replied, feeling the frustration grow. But when he saw the look of dismay on his face, something awoke in him. He remembered his passion for engineering and the impact it could have. The fight was not just about their survival, but about the preservation of what they built together. In the days that followed, James decided he could not surrender. He remembered the conversations he had with Anna and began to look for ways to unite his colleagues in a common front. He organized an informal meeting where everyone could express their concerns and ideas. The place chosen was a small restroom that, although simple, had a spirit of union. What started as a meeting with few participants quickly turned into a space for sharing and empowerment. Voices that had previously been silenced began to rise, and James found courage in the community. Anna's presence was fundamental. She brought new perspectives, innovative ideas, and an enthusiasm that resonated with everyone in attendance. Together, they began to outline a project that showed not only the effectiveness of operations, but also the human value behind each job done on the production line. The energy in the air was palpable, and James felt a wave of renewed hope. He realized that while the pressure was intense, the real strength was in unity. But as the team came together, James also began to realize the obstacles that lay ahead. Management was known to be rigid and reluctant to change their minds. They would have to present not only a solid project, but also an emotional argument that could touch those who made the decisions. The challenge was just beginning, and James knew that the fight to preserve not only his jobs, but the soul of Tesla would require more than just courage. It would require unity, resilience, and unwavering determination. In the days following the transformative meeting, James realized that the dynamics at the factory had changed. The feeling of hope that had arisen during the meeting quickly mixed with a new wave of challenges. Management, noticing the growing movement of employees, reacted with suspicion. A climate of vigilance began to take hold, and corridors that were once spaces of camaraderie became places of whispers and wary looks. James felt the weight of this new reality. The conversations that had once flowed naturally between him and his colleagues were now fraught with tension. He began to notice that most of his colleagues were hesitant to speak openly about their concerns. The expressions of frustration and fear were evident, but the courage to come together and fight against automation seemed to have evaporated. James found himself at the center of a dilemma. Should he continue to encourage his peers, even as the group's strength seemed to be waning? Hannah, on the other hand, was more determined than ever, but this determination also began to generate conflicts between them. She believed that the group needed to unite even more and put pressure on management with concrete actions, such as a strike or a formal petition. To James, this approach seemed risky and potentially self-defeating. He was concerned about the consequences that could result from such a bold action. "Anna, we can't risk our jobs like that. We need to be smart about it," he argued in a heated conversation. Frustration was building up between them, and the friendship that had once bound them together began to show signs of fraying. Meanwhile, James began to feel the physical and emotional effects of the pressure. Sleepless nights became commonplace, and he often found himself waking up amid nightmares about the uncertain future. What was once a passion for engineering was turning into a burden. He felt exhausted, as if he was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. The lack of support from some of his colleagues, who preferred to remain silent to avoid reprisals, further increased his sense of isolation. In this whirlwind of emotions, a new obstacle has emerged. During a staff meeting, one of the managers, known for his inflexible stance, announced that the company was implementing a program of voluntary layoffs. Those who accepted the severance package would receive generous severance pay, but that meant many of James's colleagues could choose to leave the company. The thought of losing more people from the group he was trying to unite sent him into a panic. He knew that if the situation continued like this, there would not be enough strength to fight automation. James began to wonder if there was a way to reverse this situation. He remembered an old mentor who always said that the power of unity is the most powerful force there is. With this in mind, he decided he needed to act quickly. A plan began to take shape in his mind, and for that, he would need Anna's help. Although they were at odds, he knew she was a born leader, and her passion could be the key to bringing people together again. With this idea, James sought out Anna and asked her to accompany him in a new approach. What if we make a presentation to management, showing not only the numbers but also the stories behind each worker? Show that we are more than just numbers in a spreadsheet. He saw a twinkle in her eyes that cheered him up. "Oh, yes, this can work. We need to show that automation is not the only viable solution," replied Anna, already starting to develop ideas. However, as James prepared for this new stage, he was faced with another twist. One of the colleagues who had become close to him, Carlos, decided to accept the resignation package. Carlos was one of the factory's veterans and a tireless supporter of the team. His departure would represent a significant loss for the group. James felt a mixture of sadness and frustration. He knew that Carlos's choice was driven by fear and the need for security, but that only solidified the fragility of the situation. Carlos's decision shook James. He began to question whether his attempt to unite his colleagues was a lost mission. With each passing day, more and more people seemed to drift away, and the pressure from management to implement automation became more intense. James found himself in a moment of deep doubt, on the verge of giving up. The idea of fighting seemed more and more like a lonely path full of uncertainty. But at an unexpected moment, Anna surprised him with a proposal. "We are going to make a presentation, not only to the management but also to the colleagues. We need to rekindle the flame of what we are and what we are fighting for together." Her determination reignited something inside James. He decided he wouldn't give up. Together, They set out to create a presentation that not only showcased the data, but told the stories of the workers, their struggles, and their hopes. As they prepared, the friendship between James and Anna began to strengthen again, though challenges still tested them. They realized that in the midst of uncertainty, what really mattered was the connection they had and the cause they were championing. James felt renewed, and the prospect of change, however small, seemed more tangible than ever. He knew that the fight was just beginning, but for the first time in a long time, he felt a spark of hope. In the days following the transformative meeting, James realized that the dynamics at the factory had changed. The feeling of hope that had arisen during the meeting quickly mixed with a new wave of challenges. Management, noticing the growing movement of employees, reacted with suspicion. A climate of vigilance began to take hold, and corridors that were once spaces of camaraderie became places of whispers and wary looks. James felt the weight of this new reality. The conversations that had once flowed naturally between him and his colleagues were now fraught with tension. He began to notice that most of his colleagues were hesitant to speak openly about their concerns. The expressions of frustration and fear were evident, but the courage to come together and fight against automation seemed to have evaporated. James found himself at the center of a dilemma. Should he continue to encourage his peers, even as the group's strength seemed to be waning? Hannah, on the other hand, was more determined than ever, but this determination also began to generate conflicts between them. She believed that the group needed to unite even more and put pressure on management with concrete actions, such as a strike or a formal petition. To James, this approach seemed risky and potentially self-defeating. "Anna, we can't risk our jobs like that. We need to be smart about it," he argued in a heated conversation. Frustration was building up between them, and the friendship that had once bound them together began to show signs of fraying. Meanwhile, James began to feel the physical and emotional effects of the pressure. Sleepless nights became commonplace, and he often found himself waking up amid nightmares about the uncertain future. What was once a passion for engineering was turning into a burden. He felt exhausted, as if he was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. The lack of support from some of his colleagues, who preferred to remain silent to avoid reprisals, further increased his sense of isolation. "Yes, this can work. We need to show that automation is not the only viable solution," replied Anna, already starting to develop ideas. However, as James prepared for this new stage, he was faced with another twist. One of the colleagues who had become close to him, Carlos, decided to accept the resignation package. Carlos was one of the factory's veterans and a tireless supporter of the team. His departure would represent a significant loss for the group. Although they were at odds, he knew she was a born leader, and her passion could be the key to bringing people together again. With this idea, James sought out Anna and asked her to accompany him in a new approach. "What if we make a presentation to management, showing not only the numbers but also the stories behind each worker? Show that we are more than just numbers in a spreadsheet." He saw a twinkle in her eyes that cheered him up. In this whirlwind of emotions, a new obstacle has emerged. During a staff meeting, one of the managers, known for his inflexible stance, announced that the company was implementing a program of voluntary layoffs. Those who accepted the severance package would receive generous severance pay, but that meant many of James's colleagues could choose to leave the company. The thought of losing more people from the group he was trying to unite sent him into a panic. He knew that if the situation continued like this, there would not be enough strength to fight automation. James began to wonder if there was a way to reverse this situation. He remembered an old mentor who always said that the power of unity is the most powerful force there is. With this in mind, he decided he needed to act quickly. A plan began to take shape in his mind, and for that, he would need Anna's help. Together, they set out to create a presentation that not only showcased the data, but told the stories of the workers, their struggles, and their hopes. As they prepared, the friendship between James and Anna began to strengthen again, though challenges still tested them. They realized that in the midst of uncertainty, what really mattered was the connection they had and the cause they were championing. James found himself in a moment of deep doubt, on the verge of giving up. The idea of fighting seemed more and more like a lonely path full of uncertainty. But at an unexpected moment, Anna surprised him with a proposal. "We are going to make a presentation, not only to the management but also to the colleagues. We need to rekindle the flame of what we are and what we are fighting for together." Her determination reignited something inside James. He decided he wouldn't give up. James felt a mixture of sadness and frustration. He knew that Carlos's choice was driven by fear and the need for security, but that only solidified the fragility of the situation. Carlos's decision shook James. He began to question whether his attempt to unite his colleagues was a lost mission. With each passing day, more and more people seemed to drift away, and the pressure from management to implement automation became more intense. James felt renewed, and the prospect of change, however small, seemed more tangible than ever. He knew that the fight was just beginning, but for the first time in a long time, he felt a spark of hope. The emotional impact of the turning point was felt with Carlos's decision. For James, this represented not only a loss, but a crisis that required a decisive response. The pain of separation and the fear of uncertainty forced him to reevaluate his own position in the struggle. He realized that he could not allow himself to be a passive spectator. The urgency of the situation cried out for action, and so the idea of creating a presentation for management and colleagues turned into a fervent commitment. Anna's new approach brought a breath of hope, and at the same time established a new path forward. What once seemed like a lone effort now became a collective movement, an opportunity to unite employees around a common cause. The decision to share workers' personal stories could not only raise awareness among management, but also boost team morale, creating a renewed sense of purpose. As James and Anna worked together, the new circumstances became clear. What they had faced so far was only the beginning. The fight against automation was not an individual battle, but a cause that belonged to everyone. The energy they were investing in the presentation was palpable, and as they got closer to the day of the presentation, the anticipation grew. James felt that they were finally ready to face the challenge that lay ahead, and the certainty that they were not alone in this fight began to solidify in their hearts. The climax of the situation was approaching, and James knew that the choices they made next could define the future of the factory and all who worked there. Anna's determination and James' new perspective came together in a powerful synergy, creating a wave of hope that could finally lead them to the change they so desired. In the days following the performance, the immediate consequences of the turning point began to manifest in the lives of James and his colleagues. The team came together in an atmosphere of renewed hope and determination, but also of uncertainty and anxiety. The presentation, which had been carefully planned by James and Anna, brought to light the stories and struggles of each worker. By sharing these emotional narratives, the team not only captivated management, but also reignited the spirit of camaraderie among them. The whispers that once ran through the halls were gradually replaced by more open and honest conversations. James felt his heart warm as he saw the faces of his colleagues, once scarred by fear, now lit up by empathy and mutual understanding. However, the new wave of hope did not come without new obstacles. Management, while touched by the stories presented, decided that automation would continue, but promised to reevaluate the process and listen more to employees. This decision, while it seemed like a small step in the right direction, was accompanied by growing pressure for workers to accept the changes. The climate of surveillance that once permeated the plant intensified again, and management began monitoring interactions among employees. The fear of reprisals became a new challenge, and many of James's colleagues began to hesitate again to speak out. James realized that despite the momentary victory, the road ahead was still fraught with uncertainty. The fight for a more humane and fair work environment required an ongoing commitment, and he knew he needed to find ways to keep the flame of togetherness burning. This new reality forced him to confront his own fears and doubts. He felt pressured to be a leader, even if the idea of leading a movement made him nervous. James began to reflect on his own ability to inspire others, and this led to an internal struggle. He wanted to make a difference, but the shadow of doubt haunted him. The friendship between James and Anne, which had been strengthened by the performance, faced further tests. With the pressure mounting, Anna began to suggest bolder actions, such as a new petition or even a mass mobilization. James, on the other hand, was cautious and tried to strike a balance between action and prudence. The debate between them intensified. "We need to act now, James. We cannot wait for the management to decide what is best for us," insisted Anna. He understood her, but he feared that an aggressive approach might destabilize what they had achieved so far. This tension, while frustrating, also became fertile ground for growth. Both were challenging themselves to become stronger and more strategic in their actions. Meanwhile, Carlos's departure still weighed heavily on James. His friend's decision to leave the factory echoed in his mind, reminding him of the fragility of the situation. He felt responsible for maintaining the union, but he understood that the fight for justice in the workplace was not just about resisting automation, but also about building a culture of solidarity and mutual support. This revelation brought a new sense of purpose, and he began to look for ways to further involve his colleagues in the decisions that affected their lives. With Anna's help, they organized informal meetups where workers could share their experiences and discuss their concerns freely. External pressure and internal distrust distressed him. The grief over Carlos's departure forced him to reflect on what it really meant to be part of a community of workers. He realized that in order to combat mistrust and fear, it was necessary to build a safe space where everyone could express their concerns without fear of reprisal. In this scenario of challenges and transformations, James began to open up to new possibilities. As the mood in the factory changed, a palpable anticipation was building for what was to come next. The next meeting with management was approaching, and James knew he would need a solid plan to keep up the pressure. He felt that every step they took brought them closer to a final confrontation, where they would have to decide whether to continue fighting or succumb to fear and apathy. This expectation created a mixture of anxiety and hope, preparing James for what was to come. As the date of the meeting approached, the tension increased. James felt the weight of his colleagues' expectations on his shoulders. He knew the fight was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, he felt stronger. He was determined not to give up, not just for Carlos or himself, but for all who still believed it was possible to fight for a better future. This conviction became a flame that illuminated his path, guiding him towards what would be a decisive moment in the history of the factory and in the very life of each worker who was there. The tension in the factory was palpable. The date for the meeting with management had finally arrived, and all eyes were on James. He felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders, an intense pressure that seemed to intensify with each step he took toward the conference room. The faces of his colleagues, full of anticipation, followed him as he walked across the factory floor, the sound of running machines echoing in the background like a symphony of uncertainty. As soon as he entered the room, James noticed the presence of the management, which seemed more imposing than ever. The executives were seated at a long table with expressions that mixed skepticism and disdain. He took a deep breath, remembering the stories each of his colleagues had shared, the struggles they had faced, and the unity that had formed. What was at stake was not only the preservation of jobs, but the dignity of each worker. The meeting began, and management presented their vision for automation. James listened intently, but with every word that came out of the executives, his resolve grew. He realized that he needed to act, that it was time to use all that he had learned and all the courage that he had cultivated. When it was his turn to speak, he stood, feeling the gaze of his colleagues on his back, like an invisible force that propelled him. "Gentlemen, we are not here just to discuss numbers and efficiency," he began, his voice firm but full of emotion. "We are here to talk about lives, about families that depend on this work. Each of us has a story, and those stories are more important than any chart you can present. We are not just resources, we are people." The room fell silent, and James felt the gaze turn to him, some faces showing surprise, others genuine interest. He continued, sharing the experiences he had heard from his colleagues, the daily struggles, fears, and hopes. Her voice grew in passion as she talked about Carlos, the friendship they had built, and how his departure represented not only a personal, but a collective loss. "We are asking to be heard so that our voices are considered in the decisions that affect our lives. We are not against change. We want to be part of it, but we need it to happen in a fair and humane way." His statement reverberated through the room, and he felt the energy shifting. The executives exchanged glances, visibly disconcerted. However, the tension has not disappeared. One of the managers, known for his rigidity, stood up. "James, we admire your passion, but automation is inevitable. We need to adapt to the market. What do you suggest we do?" The challenge was launched, and the room seemed to expect an answer that could define everyone's future. James hesitated for a brief moment. The fear of failure haunted him, but he remembered Hannah, the friendship that bound them together, and the strength that had arisen in the midst of their difficulties. He thought about the informal meetings they had organized, the honest conversations that had helped build a safe space. "I suggest that we create a workers' committee that can collaborate directly with management in implementing automation. We need to ensure that changes respect the needs of employees. Together we can find solutions that benefit everyone." The silence that followed was fraught with tension. James felt his heart race when he realized that his proposal was a risk. He had put himself in a vulnerable position, but the thought of not fighting for his colleagues was unbearable. After a few moments of murmuring one by one, the workers began to demonstrate, supporting James's proposal. "That's fair," someone shouted from the back of the room. "We want to be part of the solution." The unity that had been sown blossomed into a collective outcry, and the energy in the room began to shift. The executives, apparently surprised by the strength of the support, exchanged nervous looks. The rigid manager, who had previously seemed so secure, now seemed to be reconsidering his position. James realized that the moment of greatest tension had arrived. The manager's decision could change everything. He knew that the proposal could be seen as a threat to the control they had, but at the same time, it was a chance to build a better future. After a moment that seemed like an eternity, the manager finally spoke. "We will consider your proposal. We will meet again next week to discuss how we can work together." While it wasn't a complete victory, it was a significant step. The room erupted in applause, and James felt a wave of emotion run through his body. He had faced his greatest fear and emerged victorious not only for himself, but for everyone who was by his side. As he left the room, a sense of relief and triumph washed over him. He turned and saw Anna, who was looking at him with a mixture of pride and admiration. Their friendship solidified at that moment, and she approached smiling. "You are amazing, James. Together we can do it." He hugged her, feeling that the fight was still far from over, but now there was new hope. The emotional impact of that meeting reverberated through the factory. The workers, previously cautious and divided, now felt empowered and united. The fight for a more humane and just work environment was just beginning, but James knew that together they could face any challenge that came their way. The flame of solidarity had been rekindled, and he was determined to feed it, not just as a leader, but as a comrade in struggle. The meeting had been a watershed, and the consequences began to manifest quickly. In the days that followed, James noticed a palpable change in the mood of the factory. The workers, previously unmotivated and afraid, now walked with a new energy, a glint of hope in their eyes. James's proposal had not only been accepted, but it had also inspired a sense of unity that had not been seen among his colleagues for a long time. Conversations about automation, once fraught with mistrust, were now approached in a collaborative spirit. It was as if a veil of uncertainty had been lifted, allowing everyone to see a shared future. James reflected on his own journey. He remembered how a few weeks ago he felt small and helpless, fighting the idea of standing up and talking. Now, he saw himself as an agent of change, someone who had the power to influence not only his destiny, but that of everyone around him. The lessons she learned along the way became clear. The importance of listening, of coming together, and of striving for a higher purpose. This experience transformed him, shaping him into a leader who not only cared about the results, but the people behind them. Anna approached him in one of the breaks. Her expression was one of genuine joy. "James, you have no idea the impact you made. People are talking about you, about us. We are starting to be heard." He smiled, feeling grateful for the friendship that had solidified between them. Anna, with her determination and vision, had been a constant source of support, and together they became a symbol of the collective strength that now permeated the factory. Carlos, who had felt discouraged after his dismissal, was one of the most affected by the new wave of hope. With the creation of the committee, he found himself involved in the process again, bringing his ideas and suggestions on how automation could be implemented in a way that respected the work and lives of employees. The glint in his eyes returned, and James knew he had done the right thing by fighting for his colleagues. Committee meetings began to form, and the doors of management were more open than ever. Executives, who had previously seemed so far away, now actively participated in the discussions. While there was resistance in some respects, the willingness to listen to and consider workers' concerns was a sign that change was possible. James realized that the power of solidarity was starting to make a difference in an environment that had previously seemed uncompromising. As the weeks passed, the committee began to develop concrete proposals. The idea of reskilling employees to handle automation gained traction, and James was dedicated to ensuring that training was not only accessible, but also respectful of workers' knowledge and experience. He remembered every story he had heard, every struggle he had shared, and this motivated him to seek solutions that could really make a difference. The transformation was not limited to the work environment. The trust that had been built began to spill over into the personal lives of the workers. Several began to meet outside the factory, creating bonds that went beyond the workspace. Community events began to spring up, and the factory became a meeting place for solidarity and camaraderie. James, as he observed this, realized that not only were they fighting for their professional lives, but they were also creating a support network that would strengthen their communities. At the end of each day, James would sit at his desk, reflecting on how much he had changed. He felt more connected to his community, more aware of the responsibilities he had been assuming. The voices of the workers now not only reverberated in the factory, but also echoed in his mind, reminding him of the importance of every action. He knew that the road was long, and that there would still be challenges ahead, but the flame of hope had been rekindled and was more alive than ever. With these transformations, James not only became an advocate for workers' rights, but also a symbol of a new kind of leadership, one that prioritized empathy and collaboration. He was determined to continue this fight, not only for his own safety, but for everyone who shares his stories and dreams. As the sun set on the factory, James looked at his colleagues, who were now gathering around him, discussing ideas and plans. He smiled as he realized that the journey had just begun. The fight for a more just and humane future was just heating up, and he was ready to lead that change. Friendship and solidarity, which had always been his greatest strengths, now became the basis of a movement that promised to transform not only the factory, but the entire community. The story of James, Anna, Carlos, and so many others was still being written, and each new day brought the promise of a better tomorrow. They knew that together they could meet any challenge that arose, and that certainty brought them together in a way that nothing could dismantle. Change was on the way, and they would be ready to welcome it. James's actions began to generate concrete changes, not only in the factory, but also in the lives of his colleagues. The transformed atmosphere was palpable. The discouragement and mistrust that had once dominated the environment now gave way to a spirit of collaboration and hope. Committee meetings became a space where everyone could share their opinions and ideas, something that once seemed like a distant dream. The workers, who had once felt powerless, now saw themselves as part of a larger movement, a collective that fought for their rights and the dignity of work. Carlos, after being rehired, stood out in the team, contributing with innovative suggestions that not only respected the work of employees, but also improved production efficiency. He became an example of how reskilling could transform lives, and his enthusiasm inspired others to get involved. The friendship that blossomed between him and James solidified as a testament to the power of solidarity and mutual support. Anna, in turn, found her voice and became a natural leader among the workers, using her communication skills to reinforce the importance of inclusion in factory decisions. The bond between James and Anna deepened, and together they became an unstoppable force, guiding their colleagues towards a more just future. Meanwhile, the environment outside the factory has also begun to change. The bonds that were formed among workers extended to their communities, where they began to organize events and meetings that promoted dialogue and cooperation. The factory, once seen as a place of exploitation, was now transformed into a symbol of resistance and hope. James felt part of something bigger, a movement that not only sought improvements in working conditions, but also promoted social justice and inclusion. On the nights when he sat down to reflect on everything that had happened, James realized the lessons he had learned along the way. He understood now that true leadership was not just about making decisions, but also about listening and being there for others. The empathy and solidarity he cultivated became his greatest weapons in the fight for a better future. He recognized that the road was still long and that many challenges still needed to be faced, but the transformation that had already occurred filled him with hope. The struggle for social justice had become an intrinsic part of their identity. He knew that the changes they sought were not just for them, but for the future generations of workers to come. The idea of a legacy began to form in his mind. He wanted the story they were creating to be one that inspired others to fight and come together. However, as James looked to the future, he also realized that there were still challenges to overcome. There were those who, even in the face of change, opposed progress, fearing that their positions would be threatened. Resistance could be an obstacle, but James was determined to face these challenges with the same determination that guided him there. He knew that change would not occur overnight, but he was prepared to continue the struggle, reinforcing the bonds of friendship and solidarity that had been formed. As the sun set over the factory, James looked at his colleagues, who were now gathering around him, discussing plans and ideas. He felt a warmth in his heart, a sense that they were building something meaningful together. The journey that had begun as a simple desire for change had become a collective mission of transformation. The hope that had been rekindled in their hearts was a testimony to the power of unity and determination. They were ready to welcome whatever the future held for them. The story of James, Anna, Carlos, and so many others was still being written, and each new day brought the promise of a better tomorrow. Together, they had shown that true strength lay in community, friendship, and solidarity. And as night fell, James knew that regardless of the challenges that lay ahead, they would face it all together, ready to build a more just and humane future. Change was on the way, and the journey had just begun. He remembered how he faced his fears, how each challenge forced him to look inside himself and confront truths he would have preferred to ignore. His interactions with the people around him were also transformative. He had become a source of inspiration to those around him, showing that vulnerability was not weakness, but a form of strength. By helping others navigate their own challenges, the protagonist discovered a purpose that went beyond his own journey. At the end of the journey, the protagonist looked around and realized how much he had changed. The experiences he had had along the way not only shaped his character, but also redefined his priorities and values. The choices he had made, often difficult and full of uncertainty, culminated in an outcome that, although unexpected, proved to be fundamental for his personal growth. The connection he had established with others made him more empathetic, more understanding, and above all, more human. He understood that pain and joy are inseparable parts of the human experience, and that it is at the intersection of these feelings that the very essence of life resides. However, what surprised him the most was the turnaround that presented itself at the last moment. As he prepared to move forward with new plans, an old friend whom he believed he had lost forever suddenly appeared. This friend, who had taken a completely different path in life, brought with him a new perspective and an unexpected proposal. Together, they could join forces to create something truly meaningful, a project that not only reflected the learnings they had learned, but could also impact the lives of many people. The protagonist, who initially thought he would go his way alone, realized that life had other surprises in store for him. With this new opportunity in hand, he felt that the cycle of his journey had not ended, but rather expanded. What once seemed like an epilogue was actually a new chapter. Deep down, he knew that life is full of twists and turns, and that every choice made, every lesson learned, prepared him for what was to come. Not only has he become stronger, but he has also become more connected, more willing to embrace the future with hope and determination. This experience taught him that personal growth is not a destination, but an ongoing journey. Each step taken along the way brought him closer, not only to his goals, but to a deeper understanding of what it means to be human. The protagonist now saw the value in the little things, the simplicity of genuine connections, and the beauty of allowing oneself to be vulnerable in a world that often values the appearance of strength. He was ready to face the challenges that were yet to come, knowing that he had the necessary tools within him, but also understanding that he was not alone. The final message that echoed in her mind was a powerful reflection on life. Even in the greatest adversity, there is always a light that can be found, and often that light shines most brightly when shared with others. He understood that life's twists and turns were not barriers, but rather disguised opportunities, ready to be exploited. As he looked to the future, the protagonist felt a wave of renewed hope, knowing that the journey would continue and that he was more than prepared to embrace whatever came next.